Back here on Radio Row, the site of Super Bowl 47, New Orleans Convention Center. Darren McFarland here at our 102.5 The Game table. All of our coverage this week brought to you by Low T Center in Brentwood, inside Maryland Farms and Freeland Chevy Business Elite Sales. Now at our table, Hall of Famer. I love saying that word, and you probably love hearing that word. Mike Haynes, who was obviously a standout at the NFL level. I remember your days with the Raiders and the Patriots. He's now at our table. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Darren.
So what was that experience like? Let's start with Canton, because I've been there. I remember when the Titans, when Mike Munchak and Bruce Matthews and those guys were inducted into the Hall of Fame. They played the game there against the Bills. And what was that whole experience like?
Well, if you've I'm glad you've been there. Hopefully you had a chance to walk through the museum. The best way to go through it, because a lot of people just walk through it and they look at history and everything. The best way is to go through as a fan for your area, your team. Like, say, what is your team? The Texans?
Titans.
Titans? That's what I meant.
They used to be in Houston.
Yeah, that's right.
You remember the Oilers?
Yep, I remember. But anyway, if you go through and you meet someone there at the Hall of Fame and say, hey, I want to know about my team, the Titans. And so they go through and they start with the history of the Titans. They can tell you what the country was like in that time, what was going around in the world, and, make it special for you. Talk about your stadium, your great players. And that's what I think is a lot of fun. The NFL does a great job of bringing their young players back there now to try and give them a perspective on football, because a lot of these young guys have no idea what happened back in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. And so this is one way to help help their education. Hopefully you make a difference in the way they play the game, they respect the game, and some of the decisions they make off the field. That
secondary, and you were obviously a big part of it, was an unbelievable secondary with you and Haynes and everything. I mean, you guys did a lot of winning. Are you amazed at today's wide receivers? Can you imagine covering all these guys like Calvin Johnson? Seems like everybody's 6'5".
But 6'5" and run a 4.3. Come on. I can't. But, then the world record holder, Usain Bolt, is like 6'6", and, I guess he runs a 4.2 or 1 or something. It's unbelievable, but I think it's great for sports. It's great for the game that, you guys are continuing to get bigger and faster and stronger. That's probably the one guy that I don't know how I would cover, Randy Moss, another one. All these guys, there's a lot of guys. The guy at the Titans, I'm drawing a blank.
Kenny Britt.
Kenny Britt,
He's a big guy.
And so how do you cover big guys like that? I don't know. So I'd like to think that I would do a good job. I'd like to think that I'd have what it takes to do it. But you never know. So that's why you play the game.
Were you there when the whole Los Angeles, Oakland, the moving back and forth? And that is the topic. I mean, it seems like it's been a topic now for a while. When do you think the city of Los Angeles is going to get an NFL team, or do you think that they'll eventually get one?
I do think that they'll eventually get one. When, I have no idea. I'm really surprised that they don't have one.
Why is it taking so long?
One, they don't have a stadium that,
right,
that is up to the standards of today's NFL stadiums. The luxury boxes, the suites, I should say, and the locker rooms, and even the field, the experience on the field is not up to date at the Coliseum. So they have to do something, build a new site. And there's been a lot of concern that the fans, the people in the city of L.A. don't want their taxes to go up. They don't want all this stuff that comes along with the team if it's going to be negative for them. And so don't know what's going to happen. I mean, AEG, they talked about building a team right down at the convention center. I like that as a good place. I think it's close and there's ways to do it, but they won't have tailgating. And so, as everybody knows, tailgating, that's a huge problem, huge problem. So I don't really know. I'm sure it'll get rectified here soon, but I've been saying that for 5 years, and it hasn't happened yet.
What were your dealings with Al Davis like?
I had a great relationship with Al Davis. He helped me come to the Raiders, and actually that's when they were in Los Angeles. So for me, it was going home. Back in those days, your viewing audience may not know this or remember this. When you played out your contract, it didn't mean that you could go to another team. So I played out my contract, I played out my option, and so I couldn't come to terms with the Patriots, and that meant I'm out of football. And so the Raiders had been talking to the Patriots. They believed they had a deal with the Patriots. And so even though the trading deadline had passed and the Patriots said they didn't have a deal, the Raiders said they did have a deal, that was enough for me. I jumped on an airplane, flew out, signed a contract with the Raiders. Well, that was a violation of the collective bargaining agreement. And so the NFL said, hey, we're not going to honor the contract. So then I sued the National Football League to try and get the courts to decide on it. So I went to court. The judge wanted to hear the case, and him wanting to hear the case was enough for me to win the case. We walked out of the courtroom, and both sides shook hands and said, you know, Mike, you can become a Raider, and we'll work out the draft choices later. So technically, I guess I'm the first free agent, but not the way that it is typically done. And I'm glad to see that. I wish I was playing this era. You know, if you played in 6 straight Pro Bowls, you would like to think that you'd have a pretty good marketability.
Yeah, especially at the position you played.
Right.
Because those guys get the big bucks.
Well, they get the big challenges too. I mean,
That's right.
You get them because you've earned it. And you know, so a lot of my career saw a change in prices for defensive backs. When I first came in the league in 1976, the only position that made less money than defensive backs were punters and kickers. And defensive backs has always been one of the toughest positions to play, quarterback and defensive back. But the salary, it wasn't reflected in the salary. So every year I had to hold out and say, look, it doesn't say anything in my contract that I play defensive back. It says National Football League player. That's what they all say. And so I want to get paid what the good defensive players get. So as a result of that kind of attitude, I had issues every time my contract was up. And eventually we got it right.
Mike Haynes here at our table, and when you think about what we're talking about in today's game, the sport, violence, safety, all that concerning, all encompassing of the players. So what are your thoughts? Because obviously it was different when you played.
Well, I'm glad that there's a lot of focus on safety. I have 2 young kids that are playing football. My son, 13, is a quarterback, and my son, 9, who right now is a running back, who I'm trying to get to play quarterback. You know? But I think everybody knows that there's some danger associated with football. There's probably some danger associated with every sport. And a lot of guys were saying, hey, I knew that this game was dangerous when I played it, so this is ridiculous what they're doing. My feeling is I really didn't know exactly what the danger was. I think everybody knows it's dangerous. It's still dangerous and always going to be dangerous. But what they're learning now about concussions, what they're learning now about other injuries that we played with, maybe there'd be other decisions. But I still think I'd play the game. I know now that if you get a concussion, what a concussion looks like. I didn't know then. I thought if you were knocked out or you saw stars or whatever, a headache is a symptom of a concussion. There's a lot of different things that you need to know about those kinds of things, because getting a concussion itself is not a bad thing. It's getting another one while you're concussed. That's the danger. So in the old days when guys were getting knocked out on the field, going out for one play and then coming back in, that's unheard of. You can't do that. And when guys were knocked dingy and couldn't tell you the day of the week and they would still try to get back in there, you can't do that. Now, I've talked to even guys today, they're saying, oh, Mike, if I were playing today, I would get back in there because I wouldn't want to lose my starting job. And I'd say, well, I understand that feeling, understand that thinking behind that type of thing. But his wife would say, honey, I want to have a good life with you when your football career is over. We're only in our 20s right now. When we're in our 50s, I want you to know who I am. I want you to know who our kids are. I want you to have a nice life. I don't think I'd support that decision, honey. Do you still want to do it? Honey, I don't care I'm going to go do. No, I don't think so. I think guys are going to say, you know what? You're right. I love this game. I'll just wait till my brain is healed, and I'll get back in and do what I do. And so I think that's the right approach, and I think that the more we're learning, the better decisions we can make when those kind of things come up. And this concussion issue is one that everybody's concerned about. I'm glad that the NFL is taking the stance it is taking, but I want that to trickle down to youth football, because a lot of these kids may have a lot of concussions that they never make it to the National Football League. So our job really is to try to educate parents and coaches and other young football players of what some of the symptoms of a concussion are, so they can get off the field if they think they have one.
And one last thing, I know you're talking about know your stats, but it's not what you think.
Right. Well, know your stats is, folks, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2008, and I found out by total accident, just totally lucky. And I'm the spokesperson for this campaign because I don't want other men to have to be lucky in the way they find out. The Know Your Stats campaign is about men knowing their PSA number and starting to have a conversation with their doctor, because prostate cancer is a cancer that you can beat. You just have to know that you have it, catch it early. If you catch it early, it's almost 100% treatable. But if you catch it later, it's a different fight. So 1 in 6 men are going to be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and 1 in 8 women are going to be diagnosed with breast cancer. More men are going to get prostate cancer than women are going to get breast cancer, but most men can't tell you where the prostate is, what the prostate does, or what any of the symptoms are. And we need to try and change that, normalize the discussion, so that most men are going to have the luck that I had by finding out early.
It's a good message. I'm glad you're putting this out there.
Thank you.
And
Darren.
You were a treat to watch.
Thank you.
During your playing days. And I'm glad that you're in the hall and you were rewarded for your play on the field.
Thanks. So if anybody has any questions about prostate cancer, you can feel my passion.
Yes.
You go to knowyourstats.org, and we're asking folks to go there to try and help us with our campaign.
You just heard it from Mike Haynes, knowyourstats.org. We appreciate him stopping by our table. We'll take a break, and we'll be back.